For a genre with so many depictions of literal hell, it's probably no surprise that a bunch of movies end up in hell's cousin, that of course being development hell. That was very forced, but you know what? I'm gonna go with it. However, unlike the ghouls and demons that manage to claw their way out of the fiery pits of the underworld, not all movies are as lucky, even if they have been completed and are seemingly ready to just be distributed, to just be released on VOD or in cinemas. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 horror movies that have never officially been released. Number 8, Amy Makes 3. By far the most mysterious movie on this list, hence it being right at the very start. So little is known about psychological horror film Amy Makes 3. In fact, a quick glance at its Wikipedia page gives you like 3 lines of information. First, a tiny synopsis that states it's about grieving parents following the passing of their baby and the pair then being haunted by its ghost. But after that, there's not much else to go on. Not even much information about why it was shelved in the first place. We know that it was shot in 2015 and was originally supposed to be released in 2016, but practically literally nothing else. It's unclear whether the subject matter was too dark or whether there was just some legal red tape holding up the distribution, but either way, the movie hasn't come out despite apparently being finished. And even worse, there's been no updates on the movie since 2016. And it's not like this was a tiny independent movie from first-time filmmakers and actors either. This was legit. The talent involved are all professionals, including Tori DeVito, but poof, the movie just vanished without a trace and no one knows what happened to it. Maybe it will release one day, but all we know about it right now is that tiny Wikipedia page and write-up on The Hollywood Reporter about DeVito joining the cast, and a few images that you can find if you Google the movie. But hey, maybe this weird mystery surrounding the flick is actually spookier than whatever the movie could come up with itself. In a way, it has become its own ghost story, which is kinda neat. Number 7, Behind the Sightings. There have been plenty of moral panics throughout the years, but one of the weirdest has to be the Great Killer Clown Panic of 2016. Allegedly, all across America and into Canada, there were reports of creepy-looking clowns showing up in public places and kinda just standing around looking menacing, looking like they were about to do something. Now, obviously, the idea that there were a bunch of potentially dangerous clowns planning some kind of attack made the headlines, as parents in particular became terrified of their kids being abducted or worse by these nutters in dress-up. Of course, as most moral panics go, the actual scope of these reports was blown way out of proportion, which was covered, by the way, in a really great episode of a really great podcast called You're Wrong About, but still, it was a phenomenon big enough that it got filmmakers interested in making a movie about what was going on. And in comes filmmaker Tony Velopoulos, who wanted to produce a found footage mockumentary all about this phenomenon and the so-called truth behind the headlines. It was quickly shot and was initially set to release in 2016 to capitalize on the phenomenon while it was still fresh, but ultimately creative issues with the filmmakers and some of the cast led to it being shelved indefinitely. However, the work was not all for naught, as after a 4-year delay, the movie was officially released in 2021, but only in some territories, including parts of the US. And to this date, the flick still doesn't have an official release set for the UK and many other countries, and it's kind of unclear whether it ever will. Number 6, Slashed. Slashed is maybe the most peculiar project on this list, and that's kind of saying something considering the 2 movies we've already talked about and the ones we've got yet to come. Though Jed Shepard is best known now as the writer and producer of Host and Dashcam, back in 2002 he also wrote this movie, a mockumentary made by the rock band Ash. And of course, as is a trend on this list, not too much is known about the intricate plot details of the movie, but we did know that the band were going to be playing a fictionalized version of themselves alongside other famous musicians like Dave Grohl and the members of Coldplay. Coldplay also cameoed in Shaun of the Dead, by the way, which was shot around the same time, and I don't know much about that band, but hey, it seems like they were fans of early noughties British horror. Or at least friends with the people who made that kind of stuff. Now, the idea was that this was going to be a rough and ready horror film where all of these artists were hunted down by a slasher while on tour, hence the name. But for whatever reason, the actual film was never fully released. A quick look on the film's wiki page does seem to indicate that some scenes have made it to the public over the years, but never the complete package, if indeed the film was ever fully completed at all. Considering how many big names were involved though, and the novelty of the premise, that is kind of a shame. This could have been really cool. And hey, the idea of mixing real life and fiction while shooting a music to it is really cool. It actually worked as the basis of a really cool Wolf Alice movie as well, so check that one out if you can. Number 5, The Day the Clown Cried. One of the most infamous shelved movies of all time, it's actually testament to the notoriety of The Day the Clown Cried that we're still talking about it 50 years later, even though only a handful of people have actually seen what it is. Director and star Jerry Lewis was initially hesitant to take on the project, all about a clown and comic who ends up in a Nazi concentration camp after being arrested by German officers. Now, obviously, making a dark comedy set in a concentration camp kinda seems doomed before it's even gotten going. But at the time, apparently the filmmakers were confident that they could make this project work. After seeing a rough cut of the finished film though, allegedly some of the people involved realised they'd made a huge mistake. As the tale goes, various creatives involved were furious at changes that were made during filming, and this then led to disputes that ultimately got the film pulled and banned from release. Discussion about the infamous movie never died down in the years since though, and we constantly hear tales from people who did apparently see some of the footage. Now, it has been stated that a fully completed version of the movie doesn't exist, but there is a version of it that definitely does, and it's currently being housed in the Library of Congress. Number 4, I Spit on Your Rave. While he might now be best known as the host of the Great British Bake Off, or if you're in the US, the Great British Baking Show, Noel Fielding did have a long history in comedy before he got that job. And if you're in the UK, you almost certainly know him from The Mighty Boosh or Nevermind the Buzzcocks. However, he was also very nearly the star of a zombie mockumentary set at a music festival. Taking place after a virus wipes out the human population, the king of the zombies, that's Fielding by the way, decides to organise a music festival to entertain his ravenous hordes in the shelved movie I Spit on Your Rave. Now, parts of this movie were shot at the Big Chill Festival in Hertfordshire in 2009, but we've never seen the completed article. However, attendees at the time were asked to visit the festival in appropriate costumes, and apparently a world record was set for, and I quote, most amount of zombies caught on camera. Alas, this accolade is the only thing the movie can hang its hat on, as it's never actually been released. There were reports at one point that a TV show could be made from the footage that was shot, but as of this recording anyway, the movie itself seems as dead as the characters that were set to inhabit it. Number 3, Sorority House Massacre: The Final Exam. The Sorority House Massacre series is pretty much exactly what you expect it to be. In these movies, a group of college girls, mostly in their underwear of course, have to survive a night of terror as they're picked off one by one by a mysterious killer. Yeah, I'm sure we've all seen a version of this movie before. Now, the first installment in this series wasn't brilliant, but it did well enough for 2 sequels to be made. And these were directed by B-movie legend Jim Wynorski, who brought us such classic as Paranocker's Activity, The Bear Wench Project, and, weirdly, a children's film called Nessie and Me. Now, I'm not sure letting a guy responsible for those movies make a kids movie was the best idea, but, well, I guess they did it anyway. In 2015 though, Wynorski put out a poster for an unreleased 4th Sorority House Massacre movie up on his Facebook page. Principal photography had apparently been completed in 2002, but the finished version, if one even existed, is still yet to be seen. It was initially going to be released on DVD in 2007, but this fell through when distributor Concord Pictures went under. As of right now, the series remains incomplete, and it's unclear whether this movie will ever see the light of day to finish this quadrilogy. And to be honest, not to be too harsh on these movies, that might not be the most terrible thing in the world. Number 2, The Collected. The Collector is a pretty good 2009 horror movie all about a burglar who breaks into a house but finds that another robber has got there before him, and it's the worst robber you could ever want to be in a home with, as he's kitted out the entire area in Saw-esque traps. It did well enough to get a sequel called The Collection in 2012, and then there were reports that a third film was in production. Well, until it wasn't. Now, production on The Collected, very cleverly stylized as The Collected with a 3 in the title, by the way, did get underway in 2019, but only lasted for 8 days before the whole production was shut down. Several years on, and production still hasn't restarted, and it's looking unlikely that it ever will. Now, creators Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan gave an interview to the Thing with Two Heads podcast, claiming that they had tried and failed to reach the producers on the movie to ask what the hell was going on. They claimed that props from the film had been stolen and said that they were unable to restart production as they didn't actually own the rights to the series. And this is a real bummer for fans of the first 2 movies, as the second one actually ended on a cliffhanger that teased this third flick. However, the irony of a series called The Collector never being finished is maybe too sweet to not find a little bit funny. Number 1, AllAmerican Massacre. The late Tobe Hooper is of course regarded widely as one of the greatest horror directors to ever grace cinema. The twisted brains behind the likes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Poltergeist, Hooper has been cited by many a horror director as being a major influence. And consequently, following Tobe's passing in 2017, a bunch of those influences have since made it onto screen, with so many homages of his work coming out both since his death and even when he was alive. However, one of the strangest homages to his work was actually made 17 years prior to his death by his own son. Set after the events of the second Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, Tony Hooper's AllAmerican Massacre brought back actor Bill Moseley to reprise his role as Chop Top. The film would have allegedly seen the Vietnam vet escape the psychiatric ward that he was being held in go on, as you might have guessed, an all-American rampage. Apparently, the film was in fact finished and set for a theatrical release, but obviously 17 years on, that still hasn't happened. And why? Well, nobody really knows. Rights reasons, financial problems, issues over the movie's quality have all been touted in the years since, but ultimately, nobody really knows why the finished movie hasn't seen a theatrical release, and it has kind of become one of horror's greatest mysteries in and of itself. So that's our list. Want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Would you like to see any of these shelved movies? And are there any other interesting ones that I missed off here? Please let us know, and while you're down there, could you also please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Horror for more lists and news like this on the regular. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.